A poor old woman is denied a first-class seat. Moments later, the pilot makes a shocking announcement. The airport was buzzing with impatient travelers rushing through security, checking their watches and waiting to board. Amid the crowd stood a frail woman named Edith Lane. Her clothes were clean but worn, her gray hair tucked beneath a faded knit hat, and her shoes scuffed from years of use. She clutched a small handbag and a slightly crumpled boarding pass in her trembling hands. Edith approached the gate agent with a hopeful smile. "Excuse me, dear," she said softly. "I was told I had a first-class seat. I think there may have been a mix-up." The agent, young and visibly stressed, barely glanced up. "Your ticket says economy, ma'am. If there was an upgrade, it would be noted. Please wait until your group is called." Edith nodded politely, trying not to feel the sting of disappointment. She stepped aside, ignored by most and silently judged by a few. A sharply dressed man nearby snorted. People always trying to scam their way into first class. She lowered her gaze, murmured an apology to no one in particular, and waited as passengers began to board. When it was finally her turn, she moved carefully down the jet bridge and into the plane, her back slightly hunched, her movements slow. She found her cramped middle seat in the rear of the plane and settled in without complaint. Just as the last of the passengers were taking their seats, the intercom crackled. A calm, authoritative voice came through. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Before we begin our journey today, there's been a last-minute seating change." Whispers rippled through the cabin. Edith looked up, puzzled. The captain continued. "Would Mrs. Edith Lane please come to the front of the plane?" A flight attendant appeared beside her row, smiling. "Mrs. Lane, the captain would like a word." Surprised and unsure, Edith rose slowly. All eyes were on her as she walked down the aisle. Passengers whispered, some curious, some judgmental. As she stepped past the curtain separating economy from first class, a tall man in uniform stepped out of the cockpit, his face warm with recognition. "Mrs. Lane," he said, removing his hat. "You don't know me, but you once changed my life." Edith blinked in confusion. "I'm sorry, sir. I don't think we've met." "No, ma'am," he said gently. "But you met a scared little boy on a train platform in Chicago 30 years ago. My mother and I were homeless, and you sat with us, gave us food, and slipped a note into my coat pocket. It said, 'No one gets through life alone. One day, help someone the way you helped me today.'" Her breath caught. The memory returned like a dream. She had done that, without a second thought. "That boy was me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You gave us hope that night. My mother got clean, found work, and raised me with the strength you showed her. I became a pilot because she believed I could fly. And today, I have the chance to return your kindness." He motioned toward a first-class seat. "Please. This seat is yours." The cabin fell silent. Even the man who had scoffed earlier looked away, ashamed. Edith stood frozen, overwhelmed. "I couldn't possibly," she whispered. "You already did," he replied, gently guiding her to the seat. As she sat down, tears welled in her eyes. The plush seat felt like a dream, but more than that, it felt like she mattered. Throughout the flight, passengers glanced her way, not with judgment, but with admiration. The captain made one more announcement before landing. "Ladies and gentlemen, today you witnessed something rare. A moment where kindness returned home. Mrs. Lane reminded us all that no act of good is ever wasted." When the plane landed, passengers applauded. Not for a celebrity, not for a hero in a uniform, but for a woman who once gave hope to a boy who never forgot. And as Edith stepped into the terminal, clutching a handwritten note the captain had slipped into her hand, "Thank you for helping me fly," she smiled, knowing her kindness had taken flight too.